The unassuming home on Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana, might not have stood out to passers-by. It was a small, modest house, one of many in a working-class neighborhood. But for Latoya Ammons and her 3 children, this house became the epicenter of terror, a place where the veil between the living and the otherworldly seemed alarmingly thin. The beginning, a new home, a dark presence. In November 2011, Latoya Ammons and her family, her 3 children and her mother, Rosa Campbell, moved into a modest rental home on Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana. It wasn't a grand house, but it was enough for their needs. For Latoya, it was supposed to be a new beginning, a place to settle down and build a stable life for her children. At first glance, the house was unremarkable. It was small, built in the early 20th century with a screened-in porch and a cozy layout. It stood in a quiet, working-class neighborhood. Nothing about it hinted at the horrors that lay ahead. But from the moment they moved in, the house seemed off. The first signs. The first unusual occurrence was subtle but unnerving. Large black flies began swarming the screened-in porch. At first, Latoya and Rosa thought it was a simple infestation. Perhaps the house had been poorly maintained, or the previous tenants had left behind trash. But as they cleaned, sealed openings, and sprayed insecticide, the flies kept returning. No matter how thoroughly they tried to rid the porch of the pests, the flies came back, buzzing relentlessly, as if drawn to something within the house. What made this more disturbing was the timing. It was late November, and winter was setting in, a time when flies typically disappeared. Yet here they were, swarming persistently, a living omen of what was to come. The noises in the night. Soon strange sounds began to echo through the house. At first it was subtle, faint creaks and groans that could easily be dismissed as the noises of an older home settling. But over time, the sounds grew louder and more distinct. Footsteps. Night after night, Latoya and Rosa lay in bed, listening as heavy footsteps echoed through the house. Sometimes the sounds came from the basement, a dark, unfinished space that felt unnervingly cold, even on warm days. Other times they seemed to move through the living room or climb the stairs, as if an unseen visitor was roaming the house. One night, Rosa heard a particularly loud noise and decided to investigate. She walked cautiously into the living room, turning on lights as she went. She saw nothing unusual, but as she stood there, she felt a sudden chill and an overwhelming sense of being watched. The shadow figures. As the days turned into weeks, the family began to see shadowy figures darting through the house. Latoya described them as solidly black, humanoid shapes that moved quickly, often vanishing before she could get a good look. One evening, as Latoya sat in the living room, she caught sight of a figure out of the corner of her eye. Turning her head, she saw it, a tall, dark silhouette standing motionless in the hallway. For a moment, she froze, her heart pounding. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure melted into the shadows. She told herself it must have been a trick of the light, but deep down she knew better. Something was in the house with them. The family's fear grows. By now, the atmosphere in the house had changed completely. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive, and a sense of dread seemed to hang over every room. The children were particularly affected. They became withdrawn and anxious, often complaining of bad dreams. Latoya's youngest son, just 7 years old, began to speak of an imaginary friend he called the man with the red eyes. At first, Latoya thought it was just a harmless invention of a child's imagination. But when her son described this man as living in the closet and watching him while he slept, she couldn't ignore it. The most terrifying incident occurred late one night. Latoya was jolted awake by the sound of her 12-year-old daughter screaming. Rushing to the child's room, she found her unconscious and levitating above the bed. Latoya's screams woke Rosa, who ran to help. Together they prayed desperately, shouting for the force to release the girl. After what felt like an eternity, the child descended gently onto the bed. When she woke, she had no memory of the event. A growing presence. By this point, the family was living in constant fear. Rosa, a deeply religious woman, began to suspect that they were dealing with something demonic. She urged Latoya to bring in spiritual help, and they invited local pastors and clairvoyants to the house. The clairvoyants were unequivocal in their verdict. The house was home to 200 demons. They claimed that the entities had attached themselves to the family, feeding off their fear and despair. The clairvoyants also warned that the demons were particularly drawn to Latoya's children, whom they described as vulnerable to spiritual attack. The pastors, meanwhile, performed blessings and prayers, sprinkling holy water throughout the house. For a brief time, the activity seemed to subside, but it wasn't long before the phenomena returned, stronger and more terrifying than ever. A house turned battleground. What had begun as strange noises and unsettling shadows had escalated into physical attacks and outright possession. The house was no longer just a home. It had become a battleground, a place where the unseen waged war against the living. The Ammons family knew they couldn't fight this alone. It was time to call in reinforcements. The exorcisms, battling the darkness. When Latoya Ammons realized she couldn't fight the darkness in her home alone, she turned to the church, desperate for divine intervention. By this point, her family was physically and emotionally drained. The unexplained events had taken a toll on them. Shadows lurking in corners, phantom footsteps echoing at night, and her daughter's terrifying levitation. It was no longer just a haunting. It felt like a war for their very souls. Seeking help from the church, Ammons reached out to local Catholic priests, hoping they might offer solutions where others had failed. Initially, she was met with skepticism. In modern times, claims of demonic possession and haunted homes are often dismissed as superstition or mental health issues. But as Ammons recounted her family's experiences in detail, describing the swarms of flies, the shadow figures, and the levitation, her pleas began to resonate. One priest, Father Michael Maginot, decided to investigate further. The initial assessment. Father Maginot's first visit to the house was unremarkable at first. He walked through the rooms, listening to Ammons describe the oppressive atmosphere. But soon, things took a strange turn. As the priest sprinkled holy water around the home, Ammons and her mother claimed they felt the walls tremble. The air grew heavy, and an overwhelming sense of dread descended on them. Though skeptical at first, Father Maginot couldn't deny the palpable tension in the house. He decided to perform a minor exorcism on Latoya Ammons herself, a series of prayers and blessings intended to drive out any malevolent presence that might have attached itself to her. The possession. The situation escalated when Ammons began to exhibit signs of possession. During one of the rituals, her demeanor changed abruptly. She growled, her voice dropping to an unnatural pitch, and her eyes seemed to glaze over. Witnesses, including her own family, reported that her strength became unnaturally intense. It took several people to restrain her. Father Maginot prayed louder, commanding the entity to leave in the name of Jesus Christ. After what felt like hours, Ammons collapsed, exhausted, but seemingly herself again. Permission for a full exorcism. While the minor exorcism provided some relief, the disturbances didn't stop. Father Maginot knew that a more powerful ritual was necessary, but Catholic protocol required approval from the diocese for a full exorcism. He documented the case meticulously, gathering evidence of paranormal activity and possession to present to his superiors. The testimonies of witnesses, the physical effects on the family, and his own experiences within the house were enough to secure permission. The full exorcism. In total, Father Maginot performed 3 full exorcisms on Latoya Ammons, 2 in English and 1 in Latin. The sessions were grueling, both spiritually and physically. During the rituals, Ammons would convulse violently, as though her body was resisting the prayers. At times she screamed and cursed, her voice sounding inhuman. Father Maginot recited the rite of exorcism, invoking the power of God to banish the demons tormenting her. "I cast you out, unclean spirit, along with every satanic power of the enemy, every spectre from hell, and all your fell companions, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, be gone and stay far from this creature of God." Each word was a battle. Ammons would writhe and twist, her face contorting as if she were in agony. The room grew unbearably hot, and those present reported feeling a sinister presence, as if the entities were resisting their expulsion. The final victory. The last exorcism took place in a church. Witnesses described it as the most intense of all. Latoya screamed, her voice echoing off the walls, as Father Maginot pressed forward with his prayers. At the climax of the ritual, a deafening silence fell over the room. Ammons collapsed to the floor, her breathing ragged but calm. The priest declared that the demons had been cast out. For the first time in years, Ammons said she felt free. Aftermath. Though the exorcisms brought relief to Latoya Ammons and her family, they were still haunted by the memories of their ordeal. They decided to leave Gary, Indiana, determined to start over somewhere far from the house that had caused them so much pain. Father Maginot, meanwhile, remained cautious. He believed that while the exorcisms had driven the demons from Latoya, the house itself was still a focal point of malevolence. When Zach Bagans purchased the house years later, he interviewed Father Maginot, who shared his chilling experiences. Bagans would later confirm that the house's energy was unlike anything he had encountered, solidifying its reputation as the infamous Demon House. Zach Bagans and the Demon House. By 2014, the story of the Ammons family and their terrifying experiences in the house on Carolina Street had become a nationwide sensation. The details of the haunting and the exorcisms had been featured in news reports and investigative articles, sparking widespread curiosity and debate. One person particularly intrigued by the story was Zach Bagans, host of the wildly popular paranormal TV show Ghost Adventures. Known for his bold and dramatic investigations, Bagans had built his career on exploring the world's most haunted locations. But the Demon House was unlike anything he had encountered before. Driven by a mixture of fascination and professional curiosity, Bagans purchased the house for $35,000, intending to document its paranormal activity for a feature-length documentary. Investigating the Demon House. When Zach Bagans stepped into the house for the first time, he claimed to feel an immediate sense of dread. The air was thick, oppressive, and heavy with a malevolent energy. For someone accustomed to investigating haunted locations, this was no small statement. Over the next few months, Bagans conducted an exhaustive investigation. He installed cameras and audio equipment throughout the house, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural. During his time in the house, Bagans reported a series of disturbing experiences. Physical symptoms: he and members of his crew experienced unexplained dizziness, nausea, and sudden debilitating headaches. Bagans himself claimed to have developed serious eye problems that required medical attention after spending extended periods in the house. Unexplained phenomena. Objects moved on their own, disembodied voices were captured on audio recordings, and shadowy figures were seen darting through the rooms. Psychological effects. Crew members reported feeling emotionally unstable, with some breaking down into tears for no apparent reason. One even quit the investigation, refusing to return to the house. Bagans described the house as a gateway to hell, a place where dark forces seem to thrive and spread their influence. The turning point. While filming his documentary Demon House, Bagans claimed to have an encounter that convinced him the house was too dangerous to remain standing. Though he has never disclosed the full details, he alluded to experiencing an overwhelming confrontation with something evil, something that could not be ignored. The investigation was taking a toll not only on him but on everyone involved. Bagans began to worry that the house's influence extended beyond its walls, affecting anyone who came near it. The decision to demolish. In 2016, Zach Bagans made the controversial decision to demolish the house. For many, this was a shocking turn of events. Why would a paranormal investigator, whose career revolved around haunted locations, destroy one of the most infamous houses in America? Bagans explained that the house's energy was too dangerous to be left standing. He feared that it could harm future occupants or curious trespassers who might underestimate its power. By demolishing it, he hoped to sever the connection between the physical structure and the dark forces that seemed to inhabit it. The demolition was conducted quietly and without fanfare. By the end of the process, nothing remained of the house except an empty lot. The backlash. The demolition sparked intense debate within the paranormal community. Supporters. Many applauded Bagans' decision, believing it was a responsible move to prevent further harm. Some even viewed it as an act of compassion, protecting others from the same torment experienced by the Ammons family. Critics. Others accused Bagans of destroying evidence, arguing that the house should have been preserved for further study. Skeptics dismissed his claims entirely, suggesting the demolition was a publicity stunt designed to add mystique to his documentary. Bagans defended his choice, stating that the house's danger was too great to justify keeping it intact. For him, it was a moral decision, one he believed was necessary to ensure no one else would suffer the house's alleged wrath. The photograph, a glimpse into darkness. The photo was reportedly taken by an anonymous visitor to the property after the Ammons family had fled. The house was already gaining notoriety in Gary, Indiana, as rumors of its hauntings spread. Intrigued by the stories, the individual snapped a series of pictures from outside the house. When the film was developed, one image stood out, a shadowy figure appearing in a second-story window. The figure seemed humanoid, with what some described as horns or jagged features that gave it a distinctly demonic appearance. The photo quickly gained attention. Paranormal enthusiasts and investigators pointed to it as proof of the malevolent forces tied to the house. For many, it was a chilling validation of Latoya Ammons' claims. Analysis of the image. As the photograph circulated, skeptics and experts examined it closely. They offered several possible explanations for the eerie figure in the window. 1. Pareidolia. Skeptics argued that the figure was a case of pareidolia, the human tendency to perceive familiar patterns such as faces in random stimuli. The shadows, reflections, and textures of the window pane might have coincidentally formed a shape resembling a demonic figure. 2. Reflections. Others suggested that the figure was merely a reflection of something outside the house, such as a tree, a person, or even a trick of light interacting with the glass. 3. Manipulation. In the age of photo editing, some critics speculated that the image could have been doctored to include the figure, particularly given the growing public interest in the demon house at the time. 4. An actual entity. For believers, the photograph was undeniable evidence of the supernatural. They argued that the figure's distinctive appearance and placement were too specific to be coincidental or fabricated. Paranormal investigators claimed that shadowy manifestations are a hallmark of demonic activity, and the image fit this pattern perfectly. Zach Bagans' perspective. When Zach Bagans purchased the demon house, the photograph became part of his investigation. He examined the image and spoke with those connected to it, including the original photographer. Bagans, already convinced of the house's dark energy, regarded the photo as a possible confirmation of the malevolence within. In his documentary Demon House, Bagans featured the image, using it as one of many pieces of evidence to illustrate the house's paranormal activity. He also explored the possibility that the figure could represent a demon tied to the house or the Ammons family's experiences. The public reaction. The photograph fueled the already heated debate about the demon house. Believers. For those who accepted the story, the photo was a haunting reminder of the evil lurking in the house. It became a visual representation of the fear and torment experienced by the Ammons family. Skeptics. Critics dismissed the image as either a coincidence or a hoax, pointing out that no conclusive evidence had ever been provided to prove its authenticity. Curiosity seekers. The photograph drew more attention to the demon house, with thrill seekers and amateur investigators flocking to the site to see the infamous location for themselves. The legacy of the photograph. Today, the photograph remains a potent symbol of the demon house's story. Whether viewed as proof of the paranormal or an example of mass hysteria and sensationalism, it has become inseparable from the legend. Zach Bagans' decision to demolish the house only added to the photograph's mystique. With the physical structure gone, the image stands as one of the few tangible links to the haunting, an enigmatic reminder of the horrors that allegedly unfolded on Carolina Street. What remains? The demolition of the demon house raises profound questions. Can a structure truly harbor evil, or was the haunting a reflection of the fears, beliefs, and struggles of those who lived there? Zach Bagans believed in the power of the house, so much so that he felt it could not be allowed to stand. Whether you view his actions as heroic or sensationalized, one thing is certain: the story of the demon house will continue to captivate and terrify for years to come. Legacy. The legacy of the demon house on Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana, is a story that transcends its physical presence. Though the house was demolished in 2016, its haunting tale lives on, woven into the fabric of paranormal lore and cultural fascination. From the Ammons family's chilling experiences to Zach Bagans' dramatic investigation and ultimate demolition, the demon house has cemented itself as one of the most infamous paranormal cases of modern times. Cultural impact. The story of the demon house captured the imagination of the public like few others. Its blend of supernatural horror, religious overtones, and real-world documentation, from police reports to medical records, made it a uniquely compelling case. The media frenzy surrounding the Ammons family's ordeal, coupled with Zach Bagans' involvement, elevated the house to near mythical status. It became a symbol of the ongoing debate between skeptics and believers, sparking conversations about the nature of evil, the limits of human understanding, and the boundaries between science and the supernatural. The story also highlighted the cultural resonance of demonology and possession in the 21st century. In an era dominated by technology and rationality, the demon house reminded people that some mysteries remain unexplained, igniting both fear and fascination. The empty lot, a physical reminder. The lot where the demon house once stood is now empty, a blank slate where a house once stood accused of harboring 200 demons. For some, the demolition was a cleansing act, breaking the connection between the land and the alleged dark forces. However, others argue that tearing down the house didn't erase its energy. Paranormal enthusiasts and investigators continue to visit the site, hoping to experience lingering traces of the supernatural. Some claim that the land itself is cursed, while others suggest that the true legacy of the demon house lies not in its physical remains, but in the stories and emotions it has left behind. Zach Bagans' contribution to the legacy. Zach Bagans' documentary Demon House is a cornerstone of the case's legacy. Released in 2018, the film provided a detailed account of his investigation and personal experiences within the house. Bagans' health issues, specifically his vision problems, were cited as lasting effects of his time in the house, further adding to the narrative of its malevolent influence. While some criticized Bagans for sensationalizing the story, others praised him for bringing attention to a case that might otherwise have been forgotten. His decision to demolish the house, while controversial, added a layer of finality and mystery to the story, ensuring that it would remain a topic of discussion for years to come. Influence on the paranormal community. The Demon House has become a case study for paranormal investigators, theologians, and psychologists alike. It represents a convergence of spiritual belief, scientific inquiry, and human psychology. For believers, the case is seen as proof of the existence of demonic forces. The combination of eyewitness accounts, physical phenomena, and corroborating documentation makes it one of the most compelling hauntings in recent history. For skeptics, the story is a cautionary tale about the power of suggestion, the influence of cultural and religious beliefs, and the human tendency to find patterns in chaos. For researchers, The case has inspired discussions about the intersection of mental health, spirituality, and the paranormal, with some suggesting that the events in the demon house reflect a complex interplay of these factors. A cautionary tale. Beyond its paranormal implications, the demon house serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of delving too deeply into the unknown. For the Ammons family, it was a story of survival and resilience in the face of unrelenting terror. For Zach Bagans and his team, it was a reminder that some mysteries may come with a price. The legacy of the demon house also raises questions about the ethics of exploring and exploiting haunted locations. Was the house a genuine gateway to hell, or was its story exaggerated for fame and profit? And does destroying such a place truly end its influence, or does it simply shift the haunting to a new form, one that exists in the minds of those who hear its tale? Enduring questions. The demon house leaves us with more questions than answers. What really happened? Were the events experienced by the Ammons family and others the result of supernatural forces, psychological phenomena, or a combination of both? Can a place be evil? Is it possible for a physical location to harbor malevolent energy, or are such perceptions shaped by human fear and belief? Why do we believe? What is it about stories like this that resonate so deeply with us, even in an age of scientific skepticism? These questions ensure that the legacy of the demon house will continue to captivate and challenge us. It is a story that lingers in the imagination, a reminder of the thin veil that separates the known from the unknown.